What's up, students of Edinburgh Jazz School? In this lesson, I'm going to be giving you my 5 tips for effective practice. Just a little foreword before I get stuck into my 5 tips for practicing. Everyone practices differently. There is no one right way to get good at jazz. When the other tutors and I were discussing what we were going to do and how we were going to divide up these videos, we decided that we were all going to do a video on practicing to give you a little insight onto how we do it personally. Now, this stuff I'm going to tell you is what appeals to me and the way my brain works and what I find satisfying. But I know for a fact that Fergus is quite different, and I think David is somewhere in the middle. So take this on board, but if it doesn't work for you, you're not doing something wrong. If you're not doing it like me or you're not doing it like Fergus, you'll find your own way, but I hope that this stuff is useful to you. Tip number 1, don't take on too much. One of the big problems with a jazz course like this, or the conservatoire that I went to, or a summer school, is that you're being taught a lot of information. You'll go to one session and someone will talk about how to practice 2-5-1s, or how to play with rhythm in a certain way, or why you should transcribe, or how to play over this particular sequence. And there are so many different facets to being a good jazz musician, as well as the technique of your instrument, as well as anything else you might be doing on the side, that it feels like there's an overwhelming amount of stuff that you need to practice in order to get good. So my advice is to pick a handful of things that you want to get good at and shelve the other things for another day. Because if you can spend your time really focusing on a few small things, you're going to get really good at those, whereas spreading yourself too thinly means that you'll be able to do a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and you won't really be able to express yourself as fluently as if you're completely comfortable with a small number of things. Tip number 2, be specific in what you practice. So when you sit down to practice your instrument, don't just think, I'm going to practice the guitar, I'm going to practice jazz. You be more specific than that. What are you working on? Are you working on, let's say, rhythmic vocabulary? That's another video I've put up this week, so that's what's in my head. Are you practicing starting on beat 4, or starting on the end of 2, or practicing the second rhythm that I gave you? Be so specific that it's exactly one exercise, that you know exactly what you have to do. And that'll mean that when you sit down to practice, there's no question in your mind as to what to do. Like I said, there's just so much stuff out there, so when you sit down to practice, it can feel so overwhelming. But if you've written a little list for yourself that says, okay, I'm going to practice starting on the and of 4, and then I'm going to practice using that rhythm number 2, and then I'm going to practice my arpeggios from the 3rd on 2-5-1s, or whatever. Make a very specific list that is in detail, telling you exactly what you have to do. Tip number 3 is use a timer to help you concentrate. So if I have my list of things that I'm practicing, and I have 2 hours, say, I want to cover most things in that time if I can. So I'll say, okay, I want to spend 5 minutes doing a warm-up, and I've got a little warm-up sheet here. So I set a timer on my phone for 5 minutes, and I do nothing else apart from do that specific exercise until the timer runs out. And this helps in 2 ways. First of all, it helps you stay concentrated and stay focused on your specific task. And secondly, it means that you don't spend too long on some particular things and neglect other areas of your practice. And the other thing is, it's quite motivating for me to see a chunk of time and break it up and say, I'm going to work on a bit of this and a bit of this, and then by the end of those 2 hours, I'll have covered this nice range of things. Tip number 4, restrict the variables. So I like to think that there's at least maybe 3 or more things at play when you're practicing, when you're playing music. There's melody, there's harmony, there's rhythm, there's a technical thing on your instrument, and many more besides. But when you're practicing, you want to be very focused on the specific thing that you're working on. So if you're working on developing your rhythm, you don't want to be distracted by harmony. You don't want to be distracted by trying out a new technique on the guitar or whatever when you're practicing that rhythm. The rhythm should be the core of what you're doing, and for me, as I said, I use a timer. for that time, that 10-15 minutes, I'm not thinking about anything else. Even if I'm not playing very interesting harmonic stuff, I'm just leaving that, I'm just focusing on my rhythm. So, if you're practicing rhythmic stuff, perhaps play on a static modal vamp where you can just play the minor pentatonic. If you're practicing a technique for your instrument, do it with a very simple scale. What scale do you know best? So the C major scale or the A minor pentatonic scale, because I'm a guitarist. Use that and don't be distracted by other things that are going to cloud your brain when you're trying to focus on your specific stuff. And number 5 is try and work on a balance of the materials of music. So that is to say technical stuff like arpeggios and rhythms and chord tones and licks and the dry technical stuff like that. That's super important. And being creative as well. Because don't forget, even though there's a whole load of technical theory stuff to work through, you're in this to have a good time and express yourself. And you can do that at any stage of playing your instrument. There is no prerequisite. You don't have to know 100 2-5-1 licks before you can express yourself and have fun. There's a few ways you can try and find a balance like this. The first thing is, when you write out a list of specific tasks, do a couple that are very dry and non-creative. So like playing chord tones around a sequence, for example, playing the third on every chord or whatever. Do some stuff which is a restricted exercise where there's a little bit of freedom involved, but it's still a bit technical. And then just put on a backing track and play for 15 minutes and have fun. Another way you can do this is use restriction exercises. This involves taking something new, like a new rhythm, for example, and keeping that stable, keeping that the same, and changing something else. So for example, I'm just about to film a rhythmic vocabulary video, so that's what's going on in my brain right now. You can take a specific rhythm and you have to play that, but you can be creative with the notes. Or you can only play through a tune using a certain scale, but you can have fun with the rhythm. So it's restricting one thing and having freedom and being creative with another thing. On guitar, I like to try and improvise over a tune within a set range of frets. And it's quite a fun thing to come up with, so think about that and how it can apply to your instrument. And the third thing is transcribe. This is a great way to mix up the materials of music with music itself. Because of course you're learning from the source, so you're learning how to play music and express yourself by listening to and learning someone else expressing themselves who's a master of the style. And by doing this, you learn about technique, you learn about harmony, you learn about rhythm and time feel, as well as just absorbing a great piece of music. So those are my 5 tips for practicing. I hope they're helpful. Good luck with everything. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.